This is an open letter to my pink-skinned friends, in specific, especially to my American pink-skinned friends. There is this issue about duplicity that's unfortunately a lot of Uncle Sam's managers have played for years, for decades, for centuries, that the average folks are not really aware of. They are kept in the dark. Here's the thing. When I say duplicity, it's sort of like playing a different game when you're playing at home and playing a totally different game when you're playing away. You know, like sports team, they play a home game and then they play an away game. What is happening is that, let's take one example that has come up recently. The home game of Uncle Sam's managers, although I love Uncle Sam, but the managers are screwing it up a little, in my view. I might be wrong, but in my view, this is what they're doing. At home, they say neo-Nazis are bad. Nazis or Nazi mentality is bad. And that's clear why. They want a cohesive society. They don't want shit to hit the fan. They don't want a civil war. They don't want anybody rocking the boat, and they don't want to have wash the blood off the streets. Because they don't want that, they say any kind of extreme ideology is bad. We are against it, including neo-Nazis. But then when they play abroad, they play away, not at home, away, they say, neo-Nazis, why not? As long as, they're serving our purpose, we are willing to fund them and arm them and whatever. As long as, they're playing on our side. They're playing for us. They're pushing for our cause. Therefore, this situation in Ukraine, it's been clear that has come out clearly that for about a decade now, through Victoria Nolan's policy strategy, Mrs. Clinton's policy strategy, or the whole apparently Democratic Party's policy strategy, has been to fund and arm and train the Ukrainian ultra-nationalist / in the parentheses neo-Nazis. Ultra-nationalist, what you call a pink skin or a white person's ultra-nationalist, becomes very close to neo-Nazi. It's like a Nazi, like a extreme ideology. The whole idea is extreme ideology. Me and only me, I am right, fuck the rest of you. That's extreme ideology. So be it, extreme Muslim ideology, that me and my religion and fuck the rest of y'all, to the Nazi ideology and says me and my race and fuck the rest of y'all. So the away game for Uncle Sam's managers has been to promote whoever is fighting for their cause abroad without principles, without sticking to principles. So, for example, another example, in Afghanistan, arming and funding the fucking jihadis, the Afghan jihadis who, have had shed for brains, and for a decade, arming and funding them, even with Stinger missiles, the same Stinger missiles that they're now giving to the Ukrainian crazies, they used to give to the Afghan crazies. So, all in the name of, because this extremist group, these zealots, or these crazies are fighting against our supposed foe, who I'm not sure why Russia is always a foe, whether it's a communist or a capitalist, still Russia is a foe. I guess, it's historically Russia has been the British foe. So unfortunately, since Uncle Sam is in bed with the British for a century now, apparently whoever is British foe becomes Uncle Sam's foe. Unfortunately, I'm sure Uncle Sam doesn't have any issue with Russia. It's just, some managers of Uncle Sam are too interlocked with the British and the corporations who benefit from, demonizing one country or one person or one nationality against the others, and this demonizing and these animosity sells a lot of weapons and makes, you can make a lot of profits by selling weapons if you can, demonize a bunch of people and create this paranoia. It's all good for weapons industry, arms industry. So the point is this: the home game is extreme Muslim fundamentalism is bad. Okay, I agree. That's understandable. But abroad, we are best friends with the most fundamentalist Muslim society, group, monarchy in the world, that is Saudi Arabia. Extreme fundamentalist, Muslim, Wahhabi, sect of Islam is in Saudi Arabia, is ruling Saudi Arabia, is controlling Saudi Arabia. They just, chopped 81 heads off within in one day. They chopped 81 heads of people off according to the rules of their fucking fundamental Islam. So, and their, traditions or whatever the fuck they do over there. But the point is this: they are friends. Although how shitty they are, they're friends. Fundamentalist Muslim, fine. We deal with them. We like them. Every time we consider them as friends and buddies and partners and allies to defend against other shitheads over there. But at home, fundamentalist Muslim, we don't accept, we don't agree, and you're not welcome. Okay. Neo-Nazis, same thing. At home, not welcome. Over there, just fine. You're friends, you're pals. Here's some arms, here's some money. Go fight whoever's against us. Go fight our common enemy. Folks, this is basically running the show not based on principles, but based on immediate needs. What is important right now, not principle. The problem is if you play the game based on what is important right now, then you're going to screw yourself over in the long run. That's exactly what happened in Afghanistan. After they got rid of the Russians, then they first of all, they never were able to build a country themselves, and nobody cared. And then it became a harbor for other extremists. Then, oh shit, we have to go take care of them. The same thing is going to happen in Ukraine, as you guys pronounce it. Fundamentalists, ultra-nationalists, neo-Nazis, we arm them, we fund them just because they're fighting against our foe, our common foe. But then what happens next? First of all, Ukraine is going to be ruined, turned into a pile of rubble, like Afghanistan was. And then what? These extremists with all these, edgy weapons, Stinger missiles and anti-tank javelin missiles and all of these kinds of weapons floating around, and then they find their way, I'm sure, into Africa. After the war is over, whoever wins, a lot of these fucking things are gonna go missing. these missiles and these warfare instruments are going to find their way into Africa, into Asia, into Europe, and you think it's going to be a very good idea to have a bunch of Stinger missiles spread all over the world, where there are a lot of passenger planes also want to use the skies. I'm not sure. I mean, it's just this home and away game. We play a different game, and away we play a different game. Uncle Sam's managers play a different game. Now let's talk about independence. Independence. The word independence. At home, independence is a no-no. At home, President Abraham Lincoln is celebrated at home because he was ready to endure a civil war in order to prevent the South from becoming independent. The whole idea was the Southerners were farmers and they were using slave labor as a means of production. And the Northerners were industrialists. They didn't need slave labor. The machines were doing the job. Because their, income and their way of producing income was very different, the Southerners decided that, hey, you know what, you guys go your way, we go our way, let's call it quits. We want to be independent. And President Abraham Lincoln, who's celebrated, he's celebrated because he went to war to prevent independence of the South. He said, no, together, stronger, we need to stay a union, a united front, and because together we are stronger, and we don't agree for you motherfuckers to go become independent. Okay, makes sense. Independent, smaller independent entities are weak. But if you can put a lot of small independent entities together and form one large entity, that large entity is strong, can defend can defend the interests of its members much better as a larger entity. It makes sense. And although there were 620,000 dead at the end of Civil War in the United States, still President Abraham Lincoln is celebrated that he was able to keep the Union together. No independence. Independence bad. Makes sense. But what is the game that Uncle Sam's managers are playing abroad? The game that this is home play, that's what they're playing away. When they're playing away abroad in other countries, they advocate for independence. Every little shithole should be independent because that's the way to do things right. For example, the most obvious example was the question of Kuwait. Kuwait was a country that it's not a country, it's a fucking couple of lines on the map that was drawn by the fucking British after the end of World War I because the British wanted to break up the Ottoman Empire. Okay, break up the Ottoman Empire. So they drew some lines on the map and they formed Iraq and they formed Kuwait. Iraq, one of the oldest civilizations in the world, certainly in the Middle East, the oldest civilization in the Middle East, has been by the pen of the British, have been made a landlocked nation. It doesn't have access to warm waters. Its only access to warm waters is through a river that pours into the Persian Gulf. Persian Gulf itself is a dead end. It's a body of water that is dead end. Itself is a bad situation because it's a dead end. But Iraq doesn't even have, it's not even in the cul-de-sac of this Persian Gulf. It's at the at the other side behind the cul-de-sac, which is Kuwait. So they have cut off, the British have cut off Iraq from having any access to any warm waters on this planet. And then, but there is Kuwait right in between Iraq and the warm waters. There is one shitty little country that's the size of, let's say, Rhode Island or Connecticut. This shitty little place has been drawn on a map and has been given independence. Kuwait doesn't have an independent identity. Kuwait doesn't need an independent identity. It never had an independent identity. Kuwait is it's once the lines were drawn on the map, it's a collection of like three Arab tribes. Do you know how many Arab tribes live around the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman? Hundreds of these shitty little Arab tribes live around the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. Why give 3 of them this specific piece of land and put it in their name and say, yes, you must be independent? It's like Rhode Island declaring independence and the French drawing the line on the map and telling everybody that, yes, here, Connecticut needs to be independent and we support the independence of Connecticut or Rhode Island. Here, we draw the lines on the map and we say that it's the right thing for Connecticut to be independent from United States. And not only they did that, but also when the Iraqis said, no, this is bullshit, after many years of being a landlocked nation and suffering from it, they said, this is bullshit. We're going to go in and take Kuwait as part of our country so we can have access to warm waters. We don't want to be a landlocked nation. Suddenly, the idea of independence was important. Because at that point, America's Uncle Sam's managers are playing away. They're not playing at home. 620,000 people died. So the Southerners would not be independent because united is better than independence of every little shithole. But over there, that little shithole must stay independent. And we're going to go over there and kick some ass to make sure that little shithole stays independent. Independent? That shithole? Why? What, 13 southern states could not become independent because that was a bad idea, but the little shithole on the other side of the planet must stay independent, even though it makes more sense for it to become part of Iraq, so Iraq, a country of 40 million people, can have access to warm waters? This is what I'm saying, that when I say it's a duplicity of the system, the game that they're playing, the Uncle Sam's managers play a different game at home and they play a different game abroad. On the other side of the planet, every little shithole must stay independent, including Taiwan. Taiwan must stay independent. It should not be part of China. Why? It's a little island sitting off the coast of 1 billion people. And racially they're identical, lingually they're identical, culturally they're identical. They were the same people. They were living over there. Some of them went and started living in the island. Now, they have nothing to be independent for or about. Except the fact that, this is the same idea about in Taiwan, this is the same idea in Kuwait. It's like, if you can keep those little abroad, the idea of independence is promoted. They broke up Yugoslavia into like 6 different pieces because independence abroad is very important. Everybody should be independent. Every little shithole should be independent of every other little shithole. But us, moi, we need to be united because we are stronger united. Isn't that duplicity? Isn't that playing not based on principles, but based on, duplicity? Because if you play based on principles, you recognize that what is good for me is also good for you. But when you play based on, short-term benefits, greed, your personal benefits, and fuck the rest of the motherfuckers, it dictates that you should stay united and the rest of those motherfuckers should all stay divided. If they're large, they should be broken up to itsy bitsy little pieces. So they all, first of all, they all would be dependent on you for their defense. Kuwait can't defend itself. It's a country of, 500,000 people. It's a Rhode Island. It's a Long Island. It's a Connecticut. It has no way or means it can be independent. Why it should be independent? It doesn't have an independent identity. But it must be independent. Because, the second biggest investor in the biggest finance corporation in the world, which is BlackRock, the second biggest investor in BlackRock is Kuwait. So if Kuwait was part of Iraq, that money that Kuwait was making from the oil would have been money that would be going to Iraq as being part of Iraq. That money would belong to the people of Iraq, that 40 million people, so they can maybe take care of themselves, their country a little better. On top of that, they would have access to warm waters. So they don't have to pay transit fees if every time they want to import a little shit or export a little shit, they don't have to pay transit fee to the country that is between them and warm waters, which is Kuwait. But no, Kuwait should stay independent. That money that is coming out of the Persian Gulf is being made in Persian Gulf, in the area, in the neighborhood of Iraq. That money should not be invested in that area for those people. That money should be invested in New York, in BlackRock. What do you call this? Do you call this playing the game based on principles? Do you call this, we are the good guys? Do you call this, independence of Kuwait is important? Why? The independence of Kuwait is not even important for the Kuwaitis. Independence of Kuwait is important for BlackRock. Period. There is one beneficiary of independence of Kuwait: BlackRock. Because instead of the money that Kuwait makes from oil, instead of that money being invested in that area, in that general area of the planet Earth, which include Iraq, instead of that money being invested there, it's being given to BlackRock to invest it in New York City, or to invest it wherever they want through New York City. While, the people in that general area of the world are living in poverty. That general area, Iraq and, around the Persian Gulf, a bunch of them, especially the Iraqis, the Syrians, they're living in poverty. The Jordanians, They're living in poverty. The money that can be benefit them, the wealth that is generated there, is being funneled to BlackRock and New York City on the other side of the planet. Because the independence of Kuwait is important. Because if Kuwait was not independent, this money would not be ending up in New York City to be handled by BlackRock. This wealth. The biggest investment corporation in the world. Again, independence at home, not a good idea. Together, stronger. I agree. But independence abroad, very good idea. Every little shithole should be independent from each other. And have us to defend every little shithole against every other little shithole at a price. This idea of there is Kuwait, there is Taiwan, and Ukraine. Again, Ukraine needs to have its own identity, its own independence. Ukraine should be part of, European Union. They speak Russian or a dialect of Russian. Half the country are fucking ethnically Russian. Half the population of country are ethnically Russian. What is this idea that yes, we should, funnel arms and money to keep Ukraine independent? It was independent. You kept on, Uncle Sam's managers kept on including Ukraine into NATO practices and NATO get-togethers and NATO, parties and NATO warfare, and inviting them, talking to them, and practicing with them, and training them, and eventually Russia got paranoid. Eventually Russians got paranoid. They were fine as Ukraine was independent, as long as they weren't encouraged or invited into NATO to participate in NATO activity. And as long as they weren't encouraged and invited, the Russians were fine with Ukraine being as the way they were. But you see that once the Russians realized that Ukraine is being invited, being catered to, being invited, being participated in a lot of NATO-oriented activity, the Russians got paranoid. And this is the result. Because, independence is important abroad, but at home, united better. This is what I'm saying. This is a duplicitous game that is being played, and nobody's really explaining, because there was the question of media, is whatever they say in media is approved by security agencies and what you call some civil servant has to approve of whatever the news media talks about. Some civil servant somewhere has to approve of it. We thought social media was open to all, but then I realized that the first time that I posted something on Facebook, which was an article by a well-known, specialist in this field, that pointed the finger at Victoria Nuland as an important instrument in creating the situation that we see in Ukraine by funding and arming and training, approving the funding and training and arming of the ultra nationalists in Ukraine, the neo-Nazis in Ukraine, as soon as I posted that article, Facebook blocked me for a month and said, nope, we don't, what you have posted goes against the values of our community, something like that. It's sort of like, so factual articles goes against the standards of your community? Factual articles. Now, I understood when Facebook, was blocking people when they talk about, COVID and, trying to say, okay, this vaccine is bad and is harmful and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it was understandable to block these people to say, okay, this is the best way we have come up with to prevent lots of people dying. So let's not, make up stories, come up with these, ideas that, prevents people from taking the vaccine or preventing the spread of the disease. But this is a factual article about how, this game, the home game and away game is different for Uncle Sam's managers, and whatever they, discourage at home, which is, ultra nationalism and Nazis, neo-Nazis, what they discourage at home, they encourage abroad, and they fund and they arm and they encourage abroad. This was the story of that, and it was factual with times and dates and, with recording, voice recordings. And Facebook said, no, it goes against the, standards of our community. So you're suspended for 30 days from commenting on anything. And once they suspended me, I, closed my Facebook account. I because if I am not allowed to, make my voice heard, I'm not going to hear, other voices on Facebook. Because what I've noticed is that Facebook started blocking anybody that was against this, ultra-nationalist Nazi Ukrainians. They were blocking them and promoting any post that was for these ultra-nationalists and against the Russians. It's sort of like, oh, okay, so you have they have made Facebook into a media. Again, with its own civil servant supervisor sitting on Facebook and deciding which voices should be heard, which news should be heard, and which news should not be heard. Censorship. That's exactly what they're doing with media. They have done it with social media. I'm sure there are civil servants sitting behind desks on Facebook and deciding which ideas should be promoted and which ideas should be blocked. Which facts, not ideas, not even ideas, facts. Which facts should be blocked and which facts should be promoted. So yeah, this is a game that is being played not based on principles, and the problem with that is when you don't play based on principles and you try to be smart about it and play a different game at home and different game abroad, and you promote extremists over there just because the extremists over there are, you feel you have a common enemy with the extremists over there, so you fund and arm the extremists over there. After they're done with those motherfuckers, whoever that enemy is, however the story ends over there, then they're extremists, they're crazies. Then they're going to turn their guns on a bunch of innocent folks. Exactly what happened in Afghanistan. After they were done with the Russians, they started infighting, and with loads of civilian casualties within Afghanistan, just because they were armed to the teeth by CIA, by the likes of Victoria Nolan. At that time, you cannot, arm extremists, fund extremists, just because at that moment or within a decade you have the same foe, the same enemy. Because you have a common enemy, and within that decade you fund them and you arm them, and then what happens next decade? Because that story is done and now all the arms are there, but the arms are still there. All the money and the arms that you send them are still there. Whatever happens to that war, it gets done within a decade. What then? You have a bunch of extremists, crazies, either nationalist crazies or religious crazies, who are armed to the teeth. They start spreading those arms, they start selling those arms, and now nobody can get on the fucking plane because there's 5,000 Stinger missiles spread all over the fucking planet. I'm sorry, the policymakers, the civil servants, the policymakers of Uncle Sam are very short-sighted. They don't make policy based on principles. They make policy based on short-term gains and profits for corporations. And unfortunately, they have ruined the educational system, so not many Americans really understand what's going on or care either, because they don't care because they don't understand it, because it's too, convoluted for a simple mind. And the mind has been kept simple because the educational system has been left unfunded.